Lyrena floated in the observation deck of the Eclipsera, her long, elegant ears twitching as she studied the blue and green orb spinning slowly beneath them. The hum of the ship's engines vibrated through the floor, a gentle reminder that motion was constant, inevitable, and perfectly controlled here, unlike the chaos that awaited her below. She had followed the human soldier, Kale, because the mission demanded observation, but the truth was that curiosity had lured her. Curiosity, and a sense of mischief that even she had not fully acknowledged. She tilted her head and watched a squiggling patch of clouds twist across the surface, imagining how utterly unpredictable those humans would be. When Kale emerged from the ship's hatch, dragging his bulky pack behind him as though gravity had decided to conspire against him personally, Lyrena resisted the urge to correct him. That was the first rule of observing humans: let them fail spectacularly before intervening. Kale's brow furrowed as he navigated the stairwell, his heavy boots clanging on the metallic surface, and Lyrena's ears twitched with amusement. She had long studied human physiology from afar, but seeing him struggle with something as mundane as steps made her internal sensors fire little sparks of bemusement. Gravity is a merciless teacher, she murmured to herself, though the vibration of her words made Kale pause mid-step. Did you just talk to yourself again? He asked, eyes narrowing. The corner of his mouth twitched in a way she found distinctly human, half confusion, half resignation. Observation requires articulation, she replied lightly, almost rolling the syllables, letting the words dance like tiny starlight sparks. Her ears flicked back. She hadn't meant to sound pompous, but she liked the way it startled him. Kale just shook his head and muttered something about alien nonsense, which she decided translated roughly to keep talking. It's mildly entertaining. The landing was a slapstick ballet of chaos. Earth greeted them with an explosion of colors, noises, and smells. Hovercars whined and zipped along invisible tracks above streets that smelled simultaneously of hot asphalt and fried snacks. Pedestrians moved with a randomness that would have been inefficient if it weren't so oddly captivating. One man slipped on a discarded banana peel, hardly a remarkable occurrence, except that he managed to knock over a street performer's juggling pins in the process, sending a cascade of brightly colored sticks scattering across the sidewalk. Lyrena's ears twitched in delight. They worship balance and fail spectacularly anyway, she noted. Kale swore under his breath and grabbed her arm, tugging her behind a blinking food cart. Lyrena blinked at the vendor, who seemed entirely unconcerned by the falling pins and was instead arranging steaming buns with the precision of a starship engineer. A culinary ritual, she guessed, tilting her head. The vendor stared at her blankly, then handed her a strange, cylindrical snack, muttering something unintelligible. She took it delicately, tasting it with a careful probe of her tongue. The flavor exploded with sugar, salt, and a hint of smoke. She grimaced. "The humans take risks in ways I did not anticipate," she said, earning a snort from Kale. He seemed entertained by her reactions, a rare softness in his otherwise disciplined demeanor. He pointed at a trash can that had suddenly erupted in a flurry of pigeons and whispered, "Welcome to Earth. You either get used to it or you get eaten alive by it." Lyrena's ears flicked, and she almost laughed, though laughter was a subtle thing for her species, like a ripple through water rather than an eruption. She did allow a small chuckle, which caused Kale to glance at her with genuine surprise. The day stretched ahead like a ribbon of strange, enticing hazards. They walked through a market where humans haggled with mechanical precision over prices that seemed trivial. Lyrena observed a small child nearly topple a fruit stand, only to have the vendor scold her in a gentle, sing-song tone that somehow prevented tears. She made a note to remember this. Human anger was inefficient but effective when paired with an undercurrent of affection. Kale nudged her gently and whispered, "Don't try to intervene unless you want fruit flying at your head." She nodded, her ears flicking in amusement. In the afternoon, they navigated what Kale called traffic. though Lyrina was still unconvinced that any of it had a discernible pattern. Hovercars zoomed past at alarming speeds, yet humans crossed streets with a confidence she could not reconcile with the obvious danger. One woman in a bright yellow coat tripped over a small dog, sending both tumbling into a puddle. Lyrina's ears twitched involuntarily, an almost musical staccato. Kale groaned, but she caught a faint grin, the human expression both frustrating and endearing. As evening fell, the sky painted itself in streaks of orange and violet, a visual paradox of chaos and serenity that she found mesmerizing. Lyrina perched on a park bench, her legs folded beneath her in the human imitation she had learned from observing Kale, though she suspected her posture looked comically formal. Children ran past, chasing glowing orbs she quickly identified as some sort of technological toy. One orb collided with her lap, bouncing off harmlessly, and she barely restrained herself from swatting it with her long, delicate fingers. Kale laughed quietly, shaking his head at her startled expression. "I am beginning to understand," she admitted. "Humans are absurd in every measurable way, yet endlessly fascinating." Her ears twitched in a series of subtle movements that Kale, after a long pause, decided meant approval. "I suspect your planet will require far more observation than initially anticipated." Kale smiled, ruffling his own hair in exasperation. "Welcome to the show. Grab some popcorn, or whatever that thing you were eating was, and watch the madness unfold." Night settled over the city like a soft, humming blanket. Streetlights flickered on, and the neon glow reflected in the puddles left by an afternoon rain. Lyrina observed the humans laughing, arguing, and moving with a rhythm that made no sense, yet somehow worked. Kale leaned back beside her, sighing. For the first time she noticed the small, human quirk of his smile, uneasy, yet satisfied. Her ears twitched forward and a thought sparked. Perhaps this planet was chaotic, unpredictable, and absurd, but it was also alive in a way her own ordered world could never be. Perhaps there was something to learn from imperfection, from humor, from the small victories and the spectacular failures that made every day on Earth an adventure. And as the first stars appeared overhead, Lyrina allowed herself a small, secret thrill. Following Kale had been the right decision, even if the humans were hopelessly clumsy, endlessly chaotic, and strangely delightful. She flicked her ears, as if signaling a silent laugh at the universe itself, and for the first time since leaving her home, she felt the tickle of something she had never experienced before. Genuine curiosity unbound by protocol, tinged with amusement, and most dangerously, anticipation for the absurdity tomorrow would bring. The next morning, Lyrina found herself tangled in a web of human routines, a phenomenon she was rapidly beginning to suspect required its own classification in galactic databases. Kale, as usual, was already up before dawn, muttering complaints about coffee, gravity, and the impossibility of waking up before the sun without being offended. Lyrina tilted her head, her long ears flicking in rhythmic curiosity. The humans were obsessed with rituals, and she had witnessed only the tip of the iceberg yesterday. Today, she was determined to observe in greater depth, and perhaps intervene only minimally when the chaos threatened to topple the world around them. Their first stop was a market that hummed with life, the air thick with scents that assaulted her alien senses. Fried bread, sizzling meats, and a peculiar mix of perfumes that humans seemed to apply in excessive layers. Lyrina's ears twitched as a small boy darted past, scattering crates of luminous fruits across the pavement. She reached to steady one, only to have Kale swat her hand gently away. "Let them fall," he said with a grin. "It's how they learn, or at least how they make a mess." Lyrina noted his phrasing, learning through mess, curious. Possibly inefficient but strangely effective. She followed Kale through stalls with mechanical marvels humans called gadgets. One in particular caught her attention, a device that could project holographic images of faraway places, or perhaps imaginary ones, she could not tell. A man pressed buttons, and a small virtual city appeared, complete with flying cars that moved faster than the eye could track. Lyrina's eyes widened, her ears tilting forward. "They imitate us," she whispered to Kale, who merely raised a brow and muttered, "Or they try." The attempt was messy but impressive. Lyrina smiled faintly. Humans had a stubborn determination to replicate, to innovate, even when it seemed pointless or absurd. Her amusement was interrupted by a street performer juggling spheres of glowing light. Lyrina's analytical mind instantly began calculating trajectories and velocity, but then a gust of wind from nowhere knocked the performer off balance, sending spheres bouncing across the pavement. One landed squarely in Kale's pack, causing it to hum and vibrate as though alive. Lyrina's ears twitched in laughter, silent, elegant, almost musical. Kale swore, shaking the pack like a man wrestling a small, aggressive creature. "Humans and physics," Lyrina murmured. "A delicate balance of chaos and determination." Kale laughed despite himself, and the sound struck her as peculiarly comforting, a reminder that humor was a universal, if unpredictable, element of life. As the day progressed, they navigated increasingly bizarre phenomena. A flock of robotic delivery drones collided mid-air, scattering packages like metallic confetti. A parade of people in costumes celebrating some obscure holiday caused Kale to mutter something about cultural insanity, which Lyrina found delightfully accurate. And a small dog, seemingly guided by some secret code of chaos, darted past and tangled around her legs, prompting a gentle but firm tug from Kale. She nearly fell over, ears flaring, and Kale's laughter echoed behind her. Lyrina attempted to interact with humans directly, which produced a mix of fascination and confusion. She approached a vendor selling brightly colored liquids in transparent cylinders, lifted one, and examined it closely. "Is this a nutritional necessity or a recreational stimulant?" she asked, her voice lilting with the cadence of alien precision. The vendor blinked at her, clearly uncertain whether to answer seriously or humor her. "It's soda," he said finally, gesturing vaguely at the liquid. Lyrina tasted it carefully, her face contorting at the sweet, carbonated assault. Kale shook his head, amused. "You're lucky it's not fermented," he said. Lyrina made a mental note to research human fermentation, clearly a practice both chaotic and risky, yet widely celebrated. They eventually found a quiet corner in a small park, though quiet was a relative term. Children screamed, joggers huffed, and somewhere nearby, a man argued with a holographic assistant about directions. Lyrina perched on a bench, her legs crossed in the human style, though it looked stiff and formal. Kale sat beside her, unpacking a meal he had obtained from some food stall. Lyrina observed the humans eating with an intricate, almost ritualistic precision. Forks, knives, and chopsticks danced with various levels of success. She almost laughed when a man attempted to slice a piece of meat and sent it flying into a nearby bush. Kale noticed her twitching ears. "Relax," he said. "You're among civilized chaos. Nothing explodes unless it wants to." Later, they wandered into a building Kale called a museum, a repository of human history and technology. Lyrina's mind expanded with wonder as holographic displays, mechanical inventions, and even preserved ancient objects confronted her. Humans had built towering machines, sent probes into the stars, and yet here they were, still capable of tripping over the simplest obstacles. One exhibit featured models of alien spacecraft, some remarkably accurate. Lyrina's ears flicked with pride, and she found herself laughing softly as a group of humans attempted to recreate a spacecraft in miniature form, failing spectacularly but enjoying every moment. Kale nudged her gently. "See, they're persistent," he said, "even when it's ridiculous." Lyrina nodded, filing the observation away for later analysis. Persistence combined with absurdity, perhaps the defining characteristic of humanity. Evening arrived, and the pair found themselves on a rooftop overlooking the city. Neon lights reflected off glass towers, drones zipped past, and the distant hum of hovercars created a symphony of organized chaos. Lyrina's ears twitched in fascination. "It is overwhelming," she admitted softly, "but strangely beautiful." Kale leaned back against the railing, his silhouette framed by flickering holographic advertisements. "That's Earth for you," he said. "Confusing, loud, and sometimes it feels like it's laughing at you, but you get used to it." Lyrina tilted her head, studying him, and a small smile crept across her face. His humor, his clumsy grace, and his unflinching curiosity had made this strange, chaotic world more comprehensible. As night deepened, they shared stories of their respective worlds. Kale spoke of training drills, missions, and human idiosyncrasies, while Lyrina offered observations on alien culture, physics, and philosophy, her ears flicking with every joke or pun she could translate. The contrast between their worlds created a dance of amusement and understanding. A stray drone buzzed past, startling Lyrina, and she swatted it with a delicate hand, nearly toppling herself in the process. Kale laughed, steadying her. "You'll get used to the smaller annoyances," he said. Lyrina allowed herself a small, alien chuckle, acknowledging the absurd truth in his words. By the end of the night, Lyrina realized she had begun to feel something she had not anticipated. Warmth, curiosity, and even a faint thrill at the thought of returning to these humans tomorrow. Their world was unpredictable, chaotic, and absurd, but within it, she found connection, humor, and an exhilarating sense of discovery. Her ears flicked in anticipation, and she allowed herself a thought she would not have admitted earlier. Perhaps following Kale was no longer merely observation. Perhaps it was the beginning of something far more interesting and far more dangerous than protocol could ever predict. The city lights flickered below, the laughter of humans carrying on the wind, and Lyrina's ears twitched in quiet amusement. She had entered Earth as a careful observer, detached and precise. She would leave it changed, forever caught between laughter, chaos, and a curiosity that refused to be silenced. The sun rose over the city like a hesitant observer, spilling light that bounced off glass towers and danced on puddles from a morning rain. Lyrina stepped onto the balcony of their temporary lodging, ears flicking at the distant hum of hovercars and the low chatter of early risers. Today felt different, charged with a subtle expectation that made the air itself seem curious. Kale appeared beside her, brushing sleep from his eyes and muttering something about humans being ridiculous for needing caffeine in the first place. Lyrina blinked, tilted her head, and considered the absurdity of his statement. She had come to realize that human absurdity was not merely a surface quirk, it was the heartbeat of their planet. Their first stop was a bustling plaza, where street performers, robotic delivery drones, and humans in elaborate costumes combined into a symphony of organized chaos. A man wearing a mechanical suit tripped over a child who was riding a hoverboard, sending both tumbling into a fountain. Lyrina's ears twitched involuntarily, but instead of panic, amusement surged through her. She caught the child mid-fall with a gentle, precise motion that barely disturbed the boy. Kale's mouth twitched with a grin. "You really can't help yourself, can you?" he asked. She shook her head, letting her ears flick in acknowledgement. Intervention, she realized, could be both humorous and necessary, a lesson the humans had taught her without intending to. They wandered through a park where humans were engaged in seemingly trivial activities. Picnicking, juggling, chasing small animals. One girl threw a ball into the air and missed spectacularly, hitting a holographic advertisement that beeped in protest. Lyrina's mind raced through calculations of probability, but instead of critiquing, she laughed quietly, a ripple of sound that Kale identified instantly as amusement. "You've started to get it," he said. "This is Earth's rhythm. You either dance with it or get trampled." Her ears twitched, considering the metaphor. Perhaps she was beginning to understand more than she had intended. Humor, patience, and chaos were not weaknesses. They were survival. As the afternoon sun climbed, Lyrina and Kale entered a museum showcasing human innovation. She moved slowly through the exhibits, her eyes reflecting the glow of holographic projections and mechanical models. Humans had created incredible machines to explore distant worlds, some of which even bore striking resemblance to her own species, ships. She studied one particular model, a probe that had traversed a nearby star system, collecting data with primitive yet effective technology. Her ears twitched in approval. Persistence, ingenuity, and the audacity to try despite imperfection, these were qualities that defined humanity. Kale watched her, noting the small shifts in expression, the subtle relaxation of her posture. She was learning not just about Earth, but about the delicate balance of curiosity and humility that humans embodied. Later, they wandered into a quiet residential neighborhood, where the absurdity of human life continued on a smaller scale. A dog barked incessantly at a hovering drone, which zigzagged in panicked response. A man on a balcony attempted to discipline a malfunctioning robotic vacuum that had deposited dust in the middle of the sidewalk. Lyrena stepped carefully, her ears flicking in amusement, and Kale laughed aloud at the scene. "This is normal life," he said. "Messy, loud, ridiculous, but somehow alive." Lyrena considered his words, noting the subtle reverence in his tone. Life did not have to be perfect to matter. It only had to persist. As evening approached, they found themselves on a rooftop overlooking the city, neon signs reflecting in the puddles of rain that had collected overnight. Lyrena observed humans walking below, their motions chaotic yet purposeful. Children chased glowing orbs, lovers held hands and argued playfully, vendors shouted over mechanical noises to hawk their wares. She realized she had begun to appreciate the imperfections, the stumbles, the laughter, the unpredictability. It was as though Earth itself was alive and every human movement contributed to its pulse. Kale nudged her gently. "You're quiet," he said, thinking about something. She tilted her head, her ears flicking. "I am considering the complexity of your species," she admitted. "You are inefficient, illogical at times, yet resilient. Your humor, your failures, they are not weaknesses. They are expressions of vitality." Kale chuckled, and for the first time, Lyrena noticed a softness in his eyes, a shared understanding that transcended language and species. The final test of her understanding came unexpectedly. A sudden commotion erupted nearby. A hovercar had malfunctioned, spinning out of control and heading toward a crowded intersection. Humans screamed, scattering in panic. Lyrena's analytical mind calculated trajectories, risk factors, and intervention strategies in microseconds. Without hesitation, she moved, her long ears streaming behind her, and used a combination of telekinetic force and precise timing to redirect the vehicle harmlessly into an empty alley. The crowd erupted into cheers, some mistaking her abilities for a stunt, others for alien magic. Kale laughed, shaking his head. "Guess you're officially part of the chaos now," he said. Lyrena allowed herself a small smile, ears flicking in silent acknowledgement. She had acted, not out of duty, but out of understanding and connection. Earth had taught her that action, humor, and empathy were intertwined. As night fell, they returned to the rooftop. The city lights shimmered, a chaotic yet harmonious mosaic. Lyrena observed humans interacting, laughing, and persisting in ways that defied prediction. She realized she had changed. Curiosity had become wonder, observation had become participation, and detachment had become connection. Her ears twitched as she considered the human soldier beside her, not as a subject, but as a companion, an anchor in a world simultaneously absurd and extraordinary. "Will you stay?" Kale asked softly, glancing at her. She considered the question carefully. She could return to her own people, her ordered, precise world, but something about Earth, its humor, its chaos, and its relentless vitality called to her. She tilted her head, allowing her ears to flick in a subtle, deliberate gesture. "Yes," she said, "I will remain to learn, to observe, and perhaps to laugh." Kale grinned, a mixture of relief and amusement, and offered her a strange, glowing snack he had procured from a street vendor. She accepted it carefully, tasted it, and grimaced in exaggerated fashion. Kale laughed, and she flicked her ears at him, a silent acknowledgment of shared absurdity. The night deepened, and Lyrena allowed herself to relax fully for the first time since arriving. Earth was unpredictable, chaotic, and ridiculous, yet it was alive, and she was alive within it. She had come as an observer and a student, but she would remain as something more. A participant in the dance of life, humor, and imperfection that defined this planet. Her long ears twitched once, twice, in subtle delight, and she realized with a quiet thrill that she had discovered not only a new world, but a new self. The city hummed below, indifferent yet vibrant, and Lyrena leaned back, allowing the pulse of humanity to wash over her. She had followed a human soldier to Earth, and in doing so, she had found something she had not anticipated. Laughter, connection, and the exhilarating, unpredictable joy of being alive. For the first time, she understood that life's beauty was inseparable from its chaos, and that the absurd, the humorous, and the unexpected were not to be feared, they were to be embraced. And as the stars blinked faintly above, Lyrena allowed herself a final, silent chuckle, ears flicking with the satisfaction of a journey completed, a world understood, and a self transformed.